Good morning, everybody. I'm Sam Albrecht. I'm the Director of the Office of Regulatory Oversight. Well, we're here with the Technical Advisory Committee to talk about implementation of Senate Bill 25-002. And today's February 4th, 2026. Just to go over our agenda and mention a few ground rules for members of the public. We're going to talk a little bit about a few more red lines that we've added to the rules. We'll do a quick update on the manufacturer survey. We'll give Shums Coda some time to talk about their work in the past week or so, couple of weeks, and the regional design criteria. We'll talk in detail on that today, and then we will wrap this up. So ground rules for the public is, as you know, we keep advertising these meetings. We get more and more people joining in, and every now and then we get some new ones. Just for the folks that haven't seen this slide before, we do appreciate your participation in this process. It's very important to hear from interested parties across the industry on how we can make this rule better. We recommend typing your questions in the chat or virtually raising your hand if you would like to speak. Priority will be given to TAC members. We have a limited amount of time, but we so far have not had to cut any members of the public off, so please feel free to chime in where you want to. If you have any written comments after the meeting or you need more information, please send those to me at sam.albrecht@state.co.us. Our resources for our TAC members as well as interested parties is the statute itself, Senate Bill 25-002, which was signed into law last year. The actual statute, which incorporates the version, the updates from 002, which rule all of our program is 2432, 3301 to 3329, and you can get that through the LexisNexis link on this slide deck. The administrative rules themselves, there's a hot link for that, and then Building Codes and Standards website and the Technical Advisory Committee website are two more resources. This meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on the Technical Advisory Committee website along with the slide deck. If you want to, and we generally get that up within a day or two of the meeting. If you can't wait and want to see some of the resources here, this page has not changed, and it is in some of the previous recordings attached in there, so you can actually look at this page from a previous meeting slide deck.
Sam, I'm sorry to break in and interrupt, but we're not seeing sharing your slides anymore.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I can fix that. All right, you should be getting it now.
Got it. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Heather, for calling that out. All right, can everybody still see it? All right, I want to talk real briefly about why we are with where we are, what our intent is with 002, right? And that is our goal in translating the statute change into our administrative rules and our program is really three different things. One, we're trying to keep it as simple as possible. We're trying to simplify the rules. We're also trying to keep it very clean and transparent, and we're doing that through a number of outreach standards. And that's why the meetings are recorded, and that's why we send updates in our newsletter, and we want it to be easy to follow. That's the intent. Now, with that said, it's a very complex process, and as you know, in some of the meetings that we've had some great discussion on different aspects of the rules, and we're adding some new chapters, and this is a different way of doing business than we've done in the past. So it isn't a simple rule change. It's a fairly in-depth rule change, but and we've had some previous discussions on why we're doing what we're doing. So feel free to ask questions about, hey, this is too complex. Is there a way to make this simpler? We are getting down to the last few meetings, and so we'll do what we can to keep it. But we really hope to make these rules a useful companion to the statute that was approved in 002. So just a few minor edits, new additions to the rules from the last meeting. And we're going to spend most of our time talking, I think, about the regional design criteria because we need to firm that up. And then we'll talk about at the end, we've added 3 slides on what we need to cover in our last 3 meetings for this project. So Rule 4, this is the manufacturer's rule section. If they are using a building contractor for site prep work or on-site construction related to the completion of the unit, the contractor must complete the division's contractor education regardless of whether they are licensed by a local jurisdiction or registered with the division. We had put this in the installers section, and I think the sellers section also. We thought it was appropriate to recommend adding it into the manufacturers section too. And this will tie back to the responsible parties section also. Now, as promised, I've worked on some of the enforcement rules also, and so we're rolling these out for the first time also. The division may investigate complaints filed against manufacturers, third-party agencies, inspectors, building contractors, sellers, or installers as necessary to enforce and administer these regulations. The division may also open an investigation as needed without a complaint. And then 12.3.1, in an inspection, if an inspection, investigation, or audit of a factory-built structure finds results or items that need correction, a correction notice will be issued. If a correction notice is not remedied in the appointed time frame, a notice of violation will be issued. Failure to resolve the notice of violation may result in a fine or suspension of registration. We've heard over the past few years that the process was not very clear on how this worked. We've also talked to our Attorney General representative, and they recommended adding some clarifying language, and we hope this makes sense to everybody. So that was for manufacturers and then in 12.3.2, 3.3, and 3.4, we added 3 other sub rules here. If the result of a plan review, screening, or audit finds that it's not in compliance with the adopted codes or submittal procedures, a deviation report will be issued. 12.3.3, if a registered party has violated these rules, the DOH may issue a notice of violation. And if a notice of violation is not remedied in the appointed time frame from time of issuance, DOH will issue a corrective action letter, which may result in a fine or possible suspension of revocation of the registration. So a little bit of a repeat, but if you go back to the 12.3.1 rule, this is really talking about an inspection, investigation, or audit of a factory-built structure. And then we talk about the plan review or screening, and then this captures all the registered parties that we have in our program. And then if that corrective action is not remedied, then we look at taking it to the next level. And that's really all the updated rules we have going into the next round of red lines. Any questions on what I've talked about so far? All right. Thank you. So other updates. We held a manufacturer's webinar on oh my gosh, what was that date? January 20th, I believe. And what we did on there was we kind of rolled out what we were thinking with the regional design criteria or the design criteria regions and started asking some questions. We had pretty good attendance. I don't remember the actual attendance there, but it was in the 40 or 50 range. And then we followed up with a survey right after that to every manufacturer email in our database. And so we were asking questions about how does this layout look to you? Are there any price breaks we need to know about? Or what's going to be your cost update? Or do you have any concerns about updating the 2024 code set? And so got some, and we also asked a question, I think, about Class A shingles and on roofing. Anyway, a whole series of questions. We got 9 responses back. In addition to the feedback that we heard in the meeting itself, we just wanted to give you a quick summary of that. The survey talked about, the result talked about the manufacturer designs for wind and snow align with or close to the regions in the table and what they're currently building. Most manufacturers provide Class A roofing material or have the option to do that. There's not a significant cost increase to the building code change other than the cost and time for truss suppliers to redesign the trusses. Manufacturers are concerned about updating to the 2024 IECC and the cost implications it will have for the additional insulation on the exterior. We're going to talk a little bit in detail about the 2024 IECC just a little later in this presentation. And then manufacturers in general agreement with the table, but concerned with the possible disadvantage to modulars if or when the locals do not enforce some requirements and the need for a database so the local criteria do not have to be searched. And that's something that we've heard. The tail part of that quite a bit is what we've heard from several manufacturers is they would like a single go-to location to look up what the local design criteria is. That makes it hard, as you know, because there's so many jurisdictions, cities, towns, and counties that may change their building code design criteria at any point in time, but we're going to do our best to make that workable for everybody. Now, the disadvantage is if the locals do not enforce some of our minimum requirements that we're looking at in design criteria, things like seismic, things like radon, things like that, but may not be enforced. We think we've got, so there is going to be a little bit of discussion and application with the locals on really trying to nail that down so that the manufacturers have a better pull. I think, Tracy, you asked a question when the survey was sent. I think it was sent on the 21st of January. We can get you a copy, and if you want to respond to it, that would be fine. Other recommendations, so at least one of the manufacturers said 3 regions would be instead of 5 for wind and snow. That's something that could be considered if that is a high priority for the TAC. Most construction is site specific. We understand that, right? And that's why we have the capability to, and for wind and snow, to go to site specific locations. If there's other, and even with fire suppression and wildfire mitigation, there's that possibility of going site specific or lowering of what we're looking at as far as a baseline design criteria. IFC battery storage changes, that one we've got to look into a little bit more. And then most respondents notes that the fire suppression is installed on site and not provided at the factory. So that's going to be OC work. And then mechanical load regions were not addressed. And that may, we may need to, and that was a difficult one. We knew that the mechanical loads were going to be very hard to do going forward. And we're happy to have that discussion. Tim, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. On that bullet point 4 about fire suppression, when they folks responded, I'm not quite clear that response that it was, would that be that the actual fire sprinkler piping was installed on site and not in wall cavities, or just the connection? I'm not sure what that.
They were just talking the connection, but we can
Okay.
dig into that response and try to find out what the intent was there. Donnie?
I was just going to get from the survey results, the manufacturer that responded said that they didn't provide the fire suppression, that was done on site. So these might be not jurisdictions, these might be manufacturers that do not do fire suppression in-house. And when it gets to the site location, it's retrofitted into the system or into the structure.
Tracy, you didn't hear Tim's question. Tim's question was regarding the fire suppression, and was it not being put in the walls and was being just, or was being put in the walls and just the connections were being on site. So we're trying to clarify that. Robbie, you asked a question about OC work. OC work is on-site completion. So as you know, the manufacturers may ship 2 or 3 boxes for a single family home. And then they may be doing things like installing trusses or final roofing or any of that wrap up, maybe even some mechanical HVAC stuff that is done on site for the completion of that unit as a dwelling. Any other questions or concerns on the manufacturer survey? Donnie, can you talk a little bit on the mechanical load regions not addressed?
Yeah, so the mechanical loads right now, the discussion that we had a few TAC meetings ago was trying to figure out if there's any known variances with the using the winter design temperatures for the specific area. So that wet and dry bulb value that's for that specific site, on how to calculate the low calcs for the HVAC system. So just from the research that I found, there's an acceptance of plus or minus 5, but there's not really any kind of documentation of where that comes from. It's just that based on local acceptance from the experience of the writer, is that plus or minus 5 has been accepted, but doesn't necessarily mean that's the right way to go. So I'm still trying to figure out if there's a range, but even if there is a range, it's hard to distinguish whether or not we can do a region, because there might be a lot of regions, right? And so if you think about it from just the information that we have existing, we range from -22 degrees all the way up to 16 degrees when you talk about your heat values for your winter design temperature for Colorado. So I don't know how we would break that up. And then even if you broke it up and you designed it to one region and then it goes to a region that it doesn't comply with, having to resubmit that drawing, it just increases the amount of resubmittals that may happen. So one of the things that I've been considering is proposing the idea that the just a basic duct plan is submitted at the initial review, and then when that unit gets to the site location, the remaining portion of that mechanical load, the system is submitted for review and approved at that time, because then you'll know where that unit is installed, and you'll have that winter design temperature at that point. So that's kind of like I guess, a solution that will help. But I don't know if that's going to be the best solution if we can actually find a region. The other things that came up during the research was that, when you do your mechanical load calcs, I think they allow for like 100 to 140%, what do you call it? Variance when you're doing your heat load calc. So basically you can size the unit so that it can go up to 140% of its rated usage. But then again, you might be overworking that unit, and it might cause issues that way too. So still looking into it, but I think we do have a solution. It's just if we can find something that's a little bit better, that we can get everything approved up front instead of having to wait until the back end to approve it, is really the problem right now. So.
What I really like is that the manufacturers really dug down into and came up with some really good questions. So I appreciate everybody that participated in that. Andre, I don't know if you have anything to add to the mechanical load discussion or anything else that caught your attention in the manufacturer's survey results.
No, I think it's a really good summary, Sam, and thank you very much for the opportunity for SCA to participate and listen in that. It was a really good discussion that day, so I very much agree. And Donnie is, very much correct. We've both been digging into this, with some regularity about is there any particular ways in which we can look at this without accidentally oversizing equipment. And obviously those varying thresholds and the way that they look in terms of commercial versus residential application, how much oversizing is acceptable. We're trying to take a good look into that. I've reached out to some of my contacts at AHRI on this topic to see if we can get some additional feedback. And just have not heard anything quite yet, but more to follow up as soon as we have it.
Thank you. The one thing that actually came out in the webinar itself was there was there were a bunch of good questions, but one really good question was, once we get these model plans approved that are set for a specific region, how much variation can we do between customization, I think was the word that was used, can we do between locations or builds of this? So we've had some internal discussions on that, and I will propose, and we'll, if need be, we can talk about it some more. This is really only going to work for the exact same design going from region to region. You can change the paint colors. That's not going to be a problem. We don't look at that. But if you start to change external sheathing or roofing materials or moving walls or adding, and it ties to the winter design temp too and the mechanical loading. If you start changing a center island and a kitchen to a peninsula workspace, if you change it from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, if you change any of the interior walls, anything that changes the thermal envelope, all that is going to be pretty much frozen in that model. So you may have to weigh doing another set of construction drawings, because we will need a final set of drawings for every unit that is for every inspection that we do, right? And so at least you will be able to start with a base that has been approved for the wind and snow. But if you're changing stuff on the construction drawings, we can't see a way forward to make it just blanket building a shell, right? So if we want to have some and Tracy, you're adding some good questions. What about window locations or door locations? I think that we would want to know where the windows and doors are and making sure that they're the right height and everything else. So we are going to have a set of plans for each time you move a window or a door. Now you can call it Model A or Model B and Model C if you want to. But the basis is when you file that plan for that specific location, we're going to need to know. Wayne?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of this has kind of been lingering the last couple meetings, but in general, have we discussed, because I don't think we've adopted by rulemaking the international existing building code or really thought about how we're going to how these buildings are going to live, kind of after this initial inspection phase, right? They're going to be turned over and then they're going to be occupied. But what if there is an addition to that building? What if there's a modification? I didn't know if there was any insight as to why IEBC wasn't considered originally, but maybe we're at that point now that we need to consider it, because the IEBC would do a lot of that work for us relative to what requirements are applicable, as part of future renovations, modifications, alterations, etc.
Wayne, great question, and rooted in statute is that once this unit is installed and inspected, any changes after that are the responsibility of the local. So
Okay.
we've not adopted that existing building ICC code because once it's in and gets its initial installation and oversight inspection, we're done.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep. Donnie?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of repeat what you said is that, for modular structures, once it receives its installation and construction insignia, the idea is that it's permanently there. So anything that's modified after the state has certified it is regulated by the locals. They just treat it as if it was built on site. The problem that we do have is that there are manufacturers that typically commercial builders that build office structures and schools that are not permanently installed that may be modified. So that's one of the things that that may need to be addressed a little bit better in rule. And the purpose of addressing it a little more in detail is that if those units are handled at the local level and that unit goes to another jurisdiction, how does that jurisdiction know that that unit is still meeting the same requirements, and who's tracking that information, stuff like that. So it can get a little more complicated on the commercial side. But residential structures and large multifamily buildings, those aren't going anywhere. So once they've been certified by the state, anything that's modified after that point is locally regulated.
Yeah, Donnie, that's a really good point. And so the relocatable structures are their own cat, right? And it's something that we've talked about internally. We've not moved to amend any rules at this point with regard to relocatable structures, but they're out there. We know the mobile school classrooms is a big one, right? And as Donnie said, a lot of office structures are mobile and get stuck on a work site and then move from work site to work site. And if they're designed for one set of regional criteria, and then modified at a local level, can they even be moved to another one since we've not inspected anything on that? Donnie?
I was just going to say, I'm not sure if you guys can see my screen, but if you look at the camera, we have modification insignias. I don't know when the last time this was applied to a structure, but there's a reason why we have these, right? There are manufacturers that do modify structures after they've already been certified, and we have the insignia for it. It's just there's not really a clear process. This may be just something that got lost in the past with these units. But the other thing too is not a lot of manufacturers are modifying their office structures. They're just leased out. Somebody might lease them for years, and then it gets its way moves its way back to the lot, the dealer's lot, and then they don't modify them until then, or they just decommission them and build new units. So it's hard to say, but we do have insignias for them. We just need to clarify the process.
Mark Lindsay.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Donnie, I got a question. What if it's modified on site underneath the local? Does that still fall underneath their alterations label?
Well, that's what I need to clarify, because technically if that unit's temporary there, it is off-site from its next location. So it's really hard to say, right? I'm not sure if we want to
Yeah.
split hairs or anything like that, but if it's not permanently installed there and there's modifications, I think there's a route that we can work with a local and say, hey, you know, this structure is not being permanently installed here. We would like to keep this under the state certification process. So when it goes to its next location, it's already been through the program and records and all the inspections for that unit, for that modification, is tracked in one spot and not at multiple locations.
Well, if it is on site and underneath the local, how is the manufacturer notified that the building has been altered?
Well, that's where the locals would have to, well, I'm just assuming that if we went one route, the locals would notify us that, hey, they're trying to modify this. And since this is a factory built structure that's temporarily, you know, have them go through us, right? But again, we just have to clarify that process. We've had to work with some as-built structures that way, just because the as-built unit might have went through a different state, arrived into a jurisdiction, but it wasn't going to be there permanently. So we worked with the locals, and we did site inspections, or what we did is we created basically the inspection process using the OC form, and then the locals would do those inspections for us, but everything was saved within our system, and then we would give it an insignia. So applying historical practices, I think we can have a process in place for them.
Right. Because the reason why I'm asking is because at that point, the data plate does not match the recertification label. So if it is moved and a local building official looks at that data plate, he's going to say, oop, timeout. What's going on here? These labels don't match.
And that's what I'm saying is when that modification happens, even if they did it at the local level, they did it, how are they tracking everything that was done before?
Right.
Or even if it was done 10 years ago and moved to another jurisdiction, where are those records at? Right.
Right.
So it's almost, it would be better that it still remains within the program for those types of modifications, but having a solution so that it doesn't have to go to the manufacturer to do those modifications. But I think that's just going to have to be something we need to discuss a little bit more and seeing how we can do that.
Well, another concerning factor is the approved plans don't match now.
Yeah, that's why I said it worked better if we keep it in within the program, because there's one location that those will be, right?
Okay.
And they'll be with us.
Okay, all good.
Thanks, Mark. Tim, you had a comment in the chat, and I think it was addressed to Tracy's question about moving windows and doors, and you said it very well, that it changes the structural framing details in the plan set. Is that what you intended?
Yeah, that's correct. We've seen that in site built quite often, doing inspections where, for whatever reason, maybe an owner comes in and says, I want to move that window over to somewhere else in a kitchen or whatever. And when we look up and we see the location of a girder truss now is on top of where that window is. And so then we kind of stop the framing inspection. So, but that's what was my point, is just moving a window or a door would take structural changes. So, you know, if it's, I think the comment from Donnie was maybe just have a plan A and a plan B. But if you're, you know, just arbitrarily wanting to move that, you'd have to run that back through. I think your plan review process that was my point.
Thanks, Tim. Tracy, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of thinking along the lines of, you know, lowering the confined space, working with 8 feet wide all the time. So, you know, not really trusses that, like,
Hey, Tracy?
so we have so we're thinking about
Hey Tracy, can you hear us?
Tracy, can you hear us, Tracy? Tracy, can you hear us okay? Yes? Okay, we are getting a very garbled voice stream from you. And so we could not hear your question. It might be worthwhile to either put your question or comment in the chat, or to drop off and then try calling back and see if your voice is a little better. But we couldn't hear you. All we heard was garble. Sorry. All right. So as we work on Tracy's question, or her calling back in to get the question again, we'll keep moving. So thank you all for that discussion. And then like I said, I appreciate the manufacturer's input on that. So let's jump into the design criteria regions. Sean, you put a question in the chat too. Would a factory be able to submit original plans with optional or alternate kitchens, bedrooms, and baths so they can be built without resubmission? That is not something that we have discussed yet, but if you want to come online and talk a little bit about that, that would be worthwhile. I would assume that the structural loads would all be the same, regardless of where they're going through. But at the end of and so that might be a possibility. I don't want to commit to it till we've had some thought about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of times the factory will design a floor plan and they'll have like a. Can you hear me, Sam?
Yeah, Tracy, I can hear you, Sean. Tracy, I had to mute you again. This time we were getting nothing but echoes. So if you've got two devices logged in, you may have to mute one of those devices because we're picking up echoes. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, well, factories a lot of times will design a home that has a master bath that's very basic, and then they'll have an alternate, maybe 5-piece bath with double vanities and stuff like that. And then they'll have maybe an alternate kitchen with a different island, or they'll offer it with a 3-bedroom and then make some slight modifications as a 4-bedroom by maybe making a family room into a 4th bedroom. And to me, those, if they were able to submit additional, again, it's kind of gets back to that option A, B, C, to where they can kind of plug and play without having to resubmit. That may, at least in my side on retail, allow us to say, not have to go through the whole resubmission process, because, what we're looking for as a retailer, if you don't have to resubmit it, then there should be some cost concessions to the consumer, to the retailer, because the fee, they're not paying the fees, they're not redesigning, they're not doing all those kinds of things. Sort of like a little bit like a DAPIA works with HUD, but not to that extent.
Donnie, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's possible, and the only thing that I would say is that it's going to be additional time. So just think about it. If you're submitting 3 different models on one plan review, you're not just looking at one version of it, you're looking at 3 versions of it. So you're increasing the amount of time that the plan reviewer has to spend reviewing that plan. So I think if we did something like that, just my suggestion, if that's something that we would do, that we charge the base fee for the square footage of the structure, and then maybe an additional fee for the model type. So, or not model type, but type A, type B, or elevation A, elevation B, just so that that additional time that is needed to spend reviewing that drawing is being accounted for on the plan reviewer side of things. Because it's still time, which costs money.
So, Sean, I heard you mention HUD code homes. I'd love to hear from yourself and other manufacturers if this is common practice for modular in other states. And since I don't keep really good track of how the other states are doing their plan reviews, if we could get some input from the manufacturers on that, we'd love to hear it. Tim, and you have an excellent comment in there regarding Broomfields. We've always allowed mirror plan sets if it's going, if it's in a subdivision, is being mirrored from one side to the other. But you're saying that you allow a master plan with various options for production builders, and you plan check all options. Has worked out very well. That's good to know. Other building officials, you guys doing the same thing Broomfield does for master plans? No, Sam, you're not. Okay. Anybody else? Oh, there you go, Sam.
Yeah, I think we don't, we do not have production houses in a lot, like a lot of places in the mountains, they're pretty much all custom. So no, we don't, although I think to react to what Tim said and Donnie, I don't, if you have a very similar structure and you've seen it before, it's easy from a plan reviewer point of view. And if engineering's similar and such like, it which should be a lot easier to plan review it from that point of view. I mean, it wouldn't
Okay.
take as long, for Model A and Model B as it would be for two separate situations.
All right, cool. Well, we'll take a look at that and try to clarify that before the next meeting. Thank you. All right, design criteria regions. Andre, I know you've got a hard step at 12, but you've got your team here with you. You kind of want to maybe go over a little bit on what you folks have been doing. And then as you have seen in the slide deck, we're going to talk in detail about the model that we're moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. So, thank you very much for the opportunity to kind of, talk about where we've been over the past couple of weeks and how we've been trying to refine this model working with the DOH team. So, as a lot of you might remember, we did that jurisdictional survey. We got about 130 results back, and we focused on a conservative interpretation of the data that we got back. And so, kind of sharing what's there. What we saw and what we shared with DOH really showed sort of a bimodal distribution. We had a really big cluster, to nobody's surprise, between about 30 and 40 pounds for snow load, because it represented a lot of the flat areas, the metro areas, right, that we anticipated, and then a long tail of data that was representative of our mountain communities, where we had a lot of communities indicating that they had over 100 pounds per square foot for their snow load, right? So we had these two major groups that we were looking at, and basically, we also looked at the wind speed rating, seeing that 85% of the jurisdictions that we surveyed were captured in the 115-mile-an-hour zone or less, right? Somewhere around there. So by the 120 zone that you've already been seeing, a lot of the data has already been captured there. And so Sam gave us license to take a good look at that and say, okay, if you had your druthers, if you were going to do this any other way, let's talk about it. Let's create other models so that way we can explain, what's working in this, or maybe where there's opportunities for refinement. So with that, Sam, would it be all right if I shared my screen?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So we put together one model here. Let me go ahead and hit share. Hey, there we go. Now it looks like we know what we're doing. All right, so we put together one model here of snow load regions that went to capture that data effectively for that long tail. So this looks a little different than what you've been seeing from Donnie, and the reason that I didn't expressly include it in slides today is because I wanted to contextualize this information for you. I did not want to present it like it was a complete alternate design being offered at the 11th hour. That was not our intention at all. What this is a collaborative effort to look really critically at what's being presented as the existing model from DOH and refine it based on different tacks, right? Different belief systems here. And so if we're just looking solely at the data of what's captured from the jurisdictions, we would see that a model like this would end up capturing about an additional 20% that show that elevated snow load above the maximum where we start site specific based on the original model here by capturing those higher two areas. But it also adds a lot of administrative complexity. There's no getting around it. Going to 8 regions, especially when hearing that, for instance, it was the preference of the manufacturer's survey that maybe 3 regions would be better consolidated and more simple. We can obviously see that there are different models or different approaches being passed around here. So we developed this model that would capture more of that just solely based on the data inputs that we received. We also then representatively created a second model for wind in which we had 4 categories. Again, this was just to take what we got in terms of data capture, which was an imperfect model. There's still a lot of the state that did not respond to the survey and a lot more information to be gotten, but generally, I believe they're representative of a lot of the numbers that we would anticipate and a lot of what Donnie's research has already shown and a lot of what came out of our meeting with ASCE with Jeanette Torrance there about her expectations about sort of the data that we would be getting back. And so, based on this, we just wanted to present this to say, hey, we are thinking about other models. We've been thinking about some of the ways that we might categorize this information or use different stopping and starting points. And obviously, if this is of interest, we can pass that along. But I wanted to make sure that we talked about this with the context that it probably needed instead of just being in the packet and sort of being presented as a separate model. So I will stop the share there and kind of go back to a little bit more of the general contents of why we created this. One of the things that you saw there was the wind region and snow region broken up as 2 separate tables with separate coding systems. Again, to address that issue of administrative feasibility, and that has actually been adopted and integrated into a later version that you'll see. But we found this thought experiment to be really, really helpful in terms of looking at how this information would accurately reflect what jurisdictions are doing in practice and how we can align that from the outside in with the model that you'll see from DOH. So that's been one of our major focuses. Otherwise, we've been working almost daily with Sam and team on questions, analyses, right, and making sure that we've been a steady partner in evaluating some of the code discussion that is going to come up later in the project today. But I just wanted to offer that information and offer any other answers to any questions that anyone has about what we've been working on since the survey data.
Does anybody have any questions for Streams Codas before we jump into where we are with regional design criteria? And I will echo what Andre said. It has been almost daily. Somebody does an email each other with, hey, well, what about this? And we have that discussion either by email or very specific to in a meeting. Tracy, you want to try again?
Gonna give it a try here.
Tracy,
Can
we
I
can hear you
ask-
better. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I'm in a bad area today, so I apologize. So the graphs or whatever that we were just seeing by this gentleman here for the Streams Coda team, it looked like it starts at like 115 for like zones. I don't know what it was. If you could put it back up, 5 through whatever, 1 through 5.
Yeah, give me just a moment here. I'll get that back on the screen for you.
Okay, great. So
Yep.
I guess my question is this: are you guys saying that SR zones 1 through
Mhm.
5 would fall under that first purple zone down below at 115? Is that what you guys are trying to do there?
No, so what you see here, the blue is a snow load or snow region
snow load, I'm
matrix.
sorry.
No, you're fine. It's a fair question. And so what this is saying is, hey, your maximum roof snow load, just like it's been proposed to you in the table that you've seen previously as the model here. Hey, this would be the maximum category you could build here. So 30 pounds, 40 pounds. And what we did is in looking at the data, we took more of like a logarithmic sort of expansion of those categories, where instead of doing increments of 20 pounds, we looked at how we could capture more of the tail end of the data. But obviously to detriment, right? This becomes more administratively complicated as you get up to around 8 different regions to administrate. So this is specific to snow load up at the top. Wind load here, or wind region, we looked at the same thing. We looked at data that we were getting back from our jurisdictions. Vast majority are using 115.
Okay.
as their typical. So that puts them less than or equal to the 115 range for that WR1. And so
Yeah.
that capture rate represents, I could pull the math on it. I think it's like 79% of all jurisdictions that we surveyed. So vast majority of the state would fall into that one category. Then
Okay.
129 and 155 become actual breaks in either wind contour maps or in adoptions that we've seen specifically. So a lot of folks get up to 129, they don't make the jump to 130, and there are reasons behind that, right? Again, up to 155 represents kind of that high end of an ASCE contour map. So we just use different data points in order to inform the table, but conceptually, the table works the same way. And what we ended up with is being able to say that we could reinforce the model, right? Conceptually, the model that DOH has been working with makes sense for the end result here. This is just another way of looking at how to tier the data.
Are these going to be shared with us? Have these been shared with us already? I haven't seen them. I'm just curious.
They have not. So I finished this at some ungodly hour of the morning last night for some last changes to it to make it a little bit more clean and readable. So I'm happy to pass that along if that's of the request here. But I also wanted to speak about this and make sure that I can contextualize this, that this wasn't meant to be a replacement model, but to kind of inform the decisions we'd already been making.
I'd love to see some of the data sets behind how you guys lump these together. So if you have any of that data that you're allowed to share or that we're allowed to, reach out and you can send that to us, or those of us that want it, that would be of interest to me.
All right, we'll do that, Tracy. As we get into our design criteria regions, you're gonna kind of see what the table is that we've shared before. And then I know we did a summary by regions TAC meeting or two ago. We can pull those slides out for you also, I think, and make sure that you've got those, Tracy. Thank you. Thank you, Andre. Any other questions for Andre? And if the TAC members like some of the stuff that's in Andre's chart, we've already incorporated some over into the chart that we're getting ready to show. Some features of it. If you want more regions, let us know. We've heard from manufacturers they like less regions, but we think that was not a very deep dive into what the manufacturers thought as far as price built on the cost of production on 3 versus 5, but it's certainly something that we can talk about, or 8, right? Tracy, you got your hand up again? Do you still have your hand up, Tracy? All right.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay, so just to go back, like the whole reason why I had asked that question earlier, and I appreciate your response, Tim, was I might not have engineered trusses for a tiny home, but I'm always working with, let's say, 8 feet wide. It's very, very common. We may have models that might be, let's say, 30 feet long, 8 feet wide. So our girders have already had engineering behind them, and we often use the same pattern over and over and over again. Same thing with our designs. That's why I asked about the door and the window, right? Like we're not going to put a window on top of a girder, but I understand what Tim's saying. My point is, once we understand these snow loads and the wind loads, if we've got to go re-engineer, how long our ridge beams need to be or what our girders need to hold or whatever, I'm trying to gather that data so that way we can start. We have to get back to using patterns and replicating, right? Even though our houses are custom and we might move doors and windows, the structure is still there. So kind of how Donnie was talking earlier about charging more money for, looking at plans 2 and 3 because doors and windows were removed for a model. I guess my question is, we're always trying to reduce our costs and, being that we do affordable housing for people. And so what happens when you guys are looking at this plan for a 30 by 8 and you're looking at 2 or 3 submissions and they all look the exact same with the exact same structure, however a few doors and windows were moved slightly? That was kind of my point. We're focused on trying to reduce our costs and lean out our processes. So that was a little bit of the mythology behind my questioning, but you guys gave me some things to think about, so I'll sit on that. But that was my whole point was we're not trying to have to go get girder stamped or, our ridge beams or whatever, continuously checked by an engineer and paying for that all the time. We're replicating and using patterns and things of that nature based off of common sizes we use all the time. So that's
Right.
kind of my point.
No, that makes sense, Tracy, and that's absolutely why we're having these meetings, right? You have to factor in your cost of production. We have to figure out the most stringent design criteria in the regions, and we're trying to factor in repeatability of a set of construction plans for
Plans. Yeah.
yeah for you from that will cover the for
So
you're
what
gonna
happens when you
you're gonna
guys are
have to.
seeing those houses? Do my costs decrease when I submit the same plan, but the
Well,
door, you
in my
guys, or am I paying the same cost every time?
well, right now it's set up to pay the same for each set of plans that come through, but you're going to have the ability for a third party agency to approve those. But when we look at where that unit's going to go for installation, it's going to there's going to be a plan filing fee for that. So that's why we were talking that you may have a, Model B, Model C, or a model plan with options A, B, and C attached into the set of construction drawings that can all be approved at one time. But if we're having to take a harder look at it, there may be more time involved, and that may change the fee structure a little bit. Donnie?
Yeah, just real quick, just to clarify, when I was talking about earlier is like, if you do a multi-model type plan submittal, it can start out as, hey, we're going to do a walk-in shower versus, a shower tub combo versus, maybe a steam shower or something like that. And then you're like, hey, we want to do a 120 square foot room for a suite, and a master suite option is going to be 160 square feet. I mean, even though the structure itself is the same, when you start moving walls around, you start changing everything else, right? Because everything is part of a system. So we want to make sure that if we do allow the option or the ability to do options, you're not making significant changes for one review by option. Because like I said, one thing can change the entire plan review itself. I've actually just talked about this recently with our plan reviewer. If somebody said, well, we are using we're changing a truss or we're changing something small, does that require a plan submittal? Well, it just depends on what you're doing, because that could affect something else along the road, right? Or down in the existing part of the plan review that you already got approved. So depending on what those options are going to be, I think we can work with it and not increase the amount of time, because it's probably just a quick look. Like, all right, well, these are different options. Do you have the correct plumbing plans for these? Do you have the correct electrical plans for this? Let's say if I didn't want to do an island, I wanted to do a peninsula, right? Although that's a simple change, you probably just change the layout of where the receptacles are going to be along that wall, right? Or other simple changes. It's something we have to look at and consider, and where we draw that line, what's considered a new plan submittal and what's going to be what can we do as part of this review and be accepted. And like Sam was saying earlier, paint color and stuff like that, I'm not too worried about it. As long as it's the same product. Roof shingles, if it's Class A roof shingles and you're using GAF and you want to go from brown shingle to gray shingle, not that big of a deal, right? But when you start changing floor plans and all that other stuff, that can affect the plan review and its approval.
Yep. Thanks, Donnie. And thank you, Tracy. I'm glad you were able to get your question in. We're going to jump into the design criteria regions, which Tracy may help also clarify some of the stuff for you. I have 3 slides on design criteria, and then I want to talk about IECC a little bit too, especially while we've got Schumes Coda on the line. And so we're getting close to finalizing that table, right? And that's what the discussion we've just had has been on. We are considering the input from the local jurisdiction, the manufacturers, and Schumes Coda on what is going to be a fairly simple set of design criteria, standards, and regions that will allow the manufacturer to pick where they want to go, right? It looks like we will have design criteria regions for wind and snow, with other design criteria set as a minimums, or yes or no, right? Because fire suppression is either yes or no. Wildfire mitigation is a couple of options, right? And so when we get to that, I want to make sure that we clarify what it is that we're considering. Not that much different than what we've talked about before. Now, there's been a lot of questions about, can you just draw me a map? And this is where it gets very hard to draw a map, and I'll explain why, right? But one way I want you to think about it is that there's going to be buckets, right? There's going to be different buckets with different sets of design criteria, and each local jurisdiction is a marble. Same color marbles go in the same color bucket, right? That might work. Or at least give you the challenges that we've got to. And maybe all the marbles in the second bucket, if you build to this set of design criteria, can also go into the light blue bucket, right? And as you go up the bucket scale, your cost of production may increase, right? And you can decide where you can decide from a manufacturer perspective where you want it to go, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at. It's not an absolute fantastic analogy yet. We're toying around with ideas like layer cakes. We've toyed around with a couple of other ideas, but I just wanted to use this bucket analogy just to give you another concept of how that might work. It's not going to be possible to draw a map, I don't think, because you may have it's not elevation based, it's not regional based, it's not wind load based. It's a combination of things that make it a little difficult. This next slide, we're going to push to get all the local jurisdiction data, even from non-responsive jurisdictions. And so we don't have it all now. As you heard from Andre, we had about 120, 130 responses. That means we're about halfway there. So we're going to be diving in and trying to get that. Shimshkota is going to help us come up with design criteria for unincorporated counties, areas that do not have building departments, and some other jurisdictions that don't have building departments. We're going to just have to pick a number and go with that. So we'll have their involvement in that. But all jurisdictions will have a home in the final table, right? Even if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or site specific, right? For wind and snow, for sure. It's interesting that unincorporated Ouray County has published roof snow loads from 24.5 to 200 pounds per square foot. And so that gives you a perfect example of why it's difficult. Now, in the table that we're considering developing, that would put Ouray County in snow loads regions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They would have there. And it's interesting also, as we started pulling this data, is that a group of local jurisdictions are no longer publishing snow loads. They're saying use the ASC hazard tool for calculating the loads, right? And that's a challenge too, because we look here at Elbert County, we've got a little bit of the Palmer Divide in the southwest corner of the county, and that's going to be different than down in the southeast corner of the county as far as snow loads. And so it's easier for the site-specific, site-built units that are just run the hazard tool when they do their planning and figure it out. It's tougher for us to come up with a region to put everybody in when the local jurisdiction is using the ASC hazard tool. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But what's also, there may be some that we go out and talk to, right, and say, would you accept a range that we can publish, or a snow load that, and for example, in Elbert County, instead of it being a 40-pound snow load, maybe it's the 30-pound snow load, maybe it's a 40 or 45, and then everything underneath it, it would be acceptable in the county, right? So that's the type of issues that we're going through. Excuse me. And there has been discussion and concern about allowing jurisdictions that may change their design criteria with the codes that update, or moving their design criteria and placement into different design criteria regions. Now, the original model and the original table we come up to, if somebody's still on the 15 or 12 IRC and IBC, and they may go to use ASC hazard tool update, right? So we're going to find a way to incorporate those. I'm recommending, and Donnie and I think Andre are in agreement, that the division develop a policy and procedure for that that's not part of the administrative rules to better accommodate changes. And so a standup, because I don't want to have to tie our process for changing where jurisdictions go into the design criteria table into a administrative rule, that if we have to modify or change it, that it drives an administrative rule change, right? So I think a separate procedure that is outside of the administrative rules is the best way to accommodate this. I know that the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board wrote something into their rules that they'll do it every 3 years. But I think we can have more flexibility if we keep that as a policy separate to that. And a policy that is shareable, right? Shareable with the local jurisdictions. And we may do outreach and say, once a year or once every other year, or, hey, this is where we have you currently located. Have you done any changes to your design criteria, or have you done any code updates that you would like for us to incorporate into our table for factory built structures going into your region? Does that make sense to everybody? All right, cool. Now, this is kind of where we are. You've seen this before. Like I said, Andre and Donnie have sat down and discussed this. I won't say hundreds of hours, but lots of hours. And Cole and Stephanie and we've pulled in other SCA experts as needed when we and so I think we're getting pretty close. So we want to kind of roll this out. Now, I'm going to scroll through a couple other slides, because every slide from this point drives some questions that you guys may have. Like, for example, what is footnote AB and what is footnote C? But we've got this basic design, which has snow regions and wind regions. We have the other design criteria minimums for all regions that we've talked about. Thermal, seismic, termite damage, wildfire, weathering, ice barrier, fire suppression, flood hazard, air freezing index, radon, mean annual temp, outdoor heating and cooling temps. And again, as you look over here, some of these are per local, just like we had the discussion on winter design temps, right? That's going to be per local. The radon is only for the IRC units, and then flood and air freezing are per local. Fire suppression has always been, if required by locals, and there is a footnote. And then the minimum class for wildfire, and then with the option, I believe the footnote allows it to, if there's no wildfire hazard, that is a possibility. But if it's a 2 or 3, you would have to, or 2, you would have to jump to a class 2 building. And then, of course, the ADU fire separation, if it's also required. So this is part 2 of that table. If I put all this on one screen, it's just too small to see. And then especially when I add the footnotes. So this was all in the slide deck that was sent out. If you, now that you have a better understanding of what it is we're talking about, take a look at the footnotes and see if you want to have any discussion on any of those footnotes. But that's the other piece of those 3 slides. Like I said, I'm going to go back in just a second. And then after we have this discussion on these 3 slides, I'm going to throw some actual examples up there of what we've pulled, right? And this is raw data, and I should have put a watermark on it as draft. But here's the Ouray County, their local data. Oops, sorry guys. Ouray County on this local data slide is elevation based on from 24.5 to 202 pound roof snow load. And so that is going to put it in regions 1 through 5. Telluride has varies. We probably need to talk to somebody about Telluride and figure out, they're using the ASC hazard tool, I believe, as site specific. We might say, what regions do you want in Telluride? And we'll put you in 3, 4, or 5, or we'll treat you like Ouray County and put you in regions 1 through 5, right? So that is the type of discussion that we still need to have. And then with wind, as you can see, for the examples we pulled, Telluride has 100 pound wind load. And we have also split this table into residential projects and commercial projects, right? Because it is different, especially when you're talking about fire suppression and some of the radon stuff. And so that is another piece of the data that we are looking at. I also envision, just to share with you, a table that has every jurisdiction listed, that we would pull out region 1 wind load with a list of every jurisdiction that has some applicability for their things. And that will allow the manufacturers to say, you know, where they draw the line on what they want to design and build to, right? Is it region 1, 2, and 3? Is it region 1 or 2? And figure out what that takes a look at. So with that said, let me go back up to here. And so for snow region 1, we're looking now, this has been a change since I think anybody has seen these charts. We went from roof snow load, I think, Donnie, to ground snow load. And then you guys want to talk about that a little bit? Andre, Donnie, anybody?
Yeah, I can, since I'm the one that changed it. So the values that are in the ground snow load are the same values that were on the original table. But the thing that came up with some conversations is trying to make sure that we distinguish the difference between the ground snow load that's needed for commercial projects under the ASCE 722 and the ASCE 7 or ASCE 722 for the residential requirements, and the requirements that are going to be for commercial. So on the commercial side, they use the ultimate ground snow load. So let's say if I use the ASCE hazard tool and I said, hey, what is the ground snow load for this location here? It'll give you a ultimate ground snow load. And then also at the bottom of that tool, it'll also say, hey, here is the residential AST, which is the allowable stress design ground snow load. So it gives a 0.7 reduction for residential. But when you're doing your roof load calcs, if you're trying to convert ground snow load to the roof loads, you're still using that design. And so the thing, or that value, it's just on the commercial side, you're using the ultimate, which would be the higher amount. And on the residential side, you're just using that 0.7 reduced value. of that ultimate. So, but at the end of the day, your roof snow loads will still be calculated using these values here. It's just for commercial side, you're using the ultimate value. So if you had a project that had a pinpoint and it said that the ultimate roof snow load, ground snow load was 58, that is what you're using. If you're using another location and it says, hey, the ultimate was, let's just say it's 70, or yeah, let's just say it's a ground snow load of 70 ultimate, but it gives you that 0.7 reduction for the residential and it puts you at 58. Well, that's the starting point for you on the residential side. So for the entire process, your starting points are different when you're doing your roof load calculations, but the ultimate number, that ultimate snow load value comes from the same, or starts at the same point. Hopefully that makes sense. And Justin probably might be able to explain this a little better. He's raised his hand there.
Justin, then Tim?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that there is no advantage for residential. Just because we're talking about a 0.7 factor doesn't mean that residential is designed for lower snow loads. It's just a difference in when those factors get applied. The building code will apply that 0.7 factor later, but for residential, they're based off of allowable snow loads instead of ultimate. So our starting point, like Donnie was saying, is different. But at the end, when we get to the actual apples to apples comparison, a residential and a commercial building in the same ground snow load area will have the exact same design snow load on the roof.
Yeah, so both, let's just say both start at 100 ground snow load on the commercial side. That's your starting point there. But on the residential side, when they have that 0.7, that value that you get out of there, so 70 pounds would be the starting point on the residential. But ultimately, they both start from the same initial value.
Yes, and they end up at the same end value. It's just we're representing the starting point differently between the two codes.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin. Tim?
Yeah, thanks. And for clarity, Donnie and everybody, or a clarification question. So if you have a jurisdiction that, such as I'm doing with Broomfield, with the upcoming 24 package, that says you need to use the ASCE 7-22 hazard tool, then that would end up sliding Broomfield into SR-5. Is that, or any jurisdiction would go into that if we don't designate a particular number?
No. So, I'm glad you asked, because I was looking at your jurisdiction, and can you go back to that table, Sam? The examples. So, yeah. So when we look at Broomfield, you designate 42 as your ground snow load for residential, and then the ASCE for commercial. So let's say that we use the ASCE data tool for your commercial projects. Whatever value that is for that exact pinpoint that was the project's going, will designate whatever the region it's going to fit in. So basically on our table, let's just say it was a 60-pound ground snow load ultimate for the commercial, it would put it in region 2, right? But your residential looks like it's going to be region 2 as well, because the way that the table set up is 40 is the maximum of 40 is region 1. So this is where we kind of run into a situation where our table has 40 and Broomfield's 42. Let's say that a ASCE data tool was used, and let's say that there was a pinpoint within Broomfield that said 37.5. Would Broomfield accept a region 1 structure, even though it's not a 42? It is a 40, and the site-specific data says 37.5, right? So if the designation at the local level has that I guess flexibility of using the ASCE data tool, there's some options here where like in your specific jurisdiction, that maybe a region 1 would be acceptable for your jurisdiction, right? at least when it comes to the design tables and how we would approve those specific units.
Okay, great. And just to throw you for another loop, I added language in my final ordinance before it went to council last week. And in the residential portion, it says 42 or allows the option of an ASCE 7-22 tool for a site-specific residential site in my jurisdiction. Reason being is that the highest, I did ASCE for data for all like 6 different parts of my county, and the 42 was the highest over by the airport, Jeffco or Rocky Mountain Airport, and quite a few of the places where some of my production builders are going to be in the center part in the northeast are down in the 37 area. So that's why we added that to give the builders. But if you're doing prescriptive straight out of the IRC, you just go with the 42, which means you got to round up to 50 in a lot of the tables. But that's, you answered my question, but if you're going to have this table for reference, you could add in, at least for Broomfield, on a residential 42 residential or ASCE tool. And then it's true on the commercial side, it's strictly ASCE tool. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Sam?
Yeah, and just to throw other things in, there's a SEAC tool. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that too. We've been using this a while, and the ASCE tool and the SEAC sometimes vary, which of course, I don't know. I mean, I think that the ASCE tool helps. But if doing it regionally, I was just looking at ours kind of over, we could easily be under the whatever. In other words, it's not as bad as it seems to put us in regions, like 3 or 4 kind of thing, or ASCE tool. I just wanted to make sure, there's a bunch of little differing things. I don't think those tools are fairly new too, and they're working on them as well.
Thank you, Sam. Donnie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Sam, we're well aware of the SEAC document, and if you remember from the initial conversations that we had at the beginning of this process, that's actually where I got a lot of my data points, because if you look at the SEAC, it has coordinates that are in there for specific points that they got their case studies from. So I actually converted all of those coordinates that are in that SEAC document, point by point, to the ASCE 7-22. So I have what the snow loads were in the SEAC document, and what those same pinpoints would be in the ASCE 7-22 snow load data for that specific point. So if you look at the Glenwood Springs, you can see that they reference the SEAC document, and based on the SEAC document, at least for their county, I think it was Gilpin, it has it at 40 PSF, right? So we have different scenarios that are going to come up. And if you look at this table, it's almost every type of scenario that you're going to run into. You're going to have one that has a range from 1-to-1 for PSF, or not 1-to-1, but one snow load to another for the PSF. You're going to have one that has a mixture of one single value in the ASCE data tool. The next one's going to be a range of 30 to 40. One's going to be just the ASCE data tool. One jurisdiction might be the same across the board. One might say, hey, you need to use a SEAC document, and that SEAC document is going to designate what their snow load is going to be. So you have that example here. And then you're going to have jurisdictions like Uray County, where they have an elevation-based system. We even have jurisdictions like Chaffee County that uses a map. And they say, hey, once you cross this line, this is your snow load, right? So all these scenarios are right here in front of you as an example of what we can run into. And that's why it makes this process more complicated, because how do you create a region across the state of Colorado when every jurisdiction uses a different method of calculating their snow loads? So that's why when you look at this example, you'll see that, Summit County could be a region 3 or 4, Broomfield could be region 2, if you'd use the 42 as your starting point. But like I said earlier, if we did the ASCE data tool and there's a point that's less than 40, and we got a model that's approved for a 40-pound snow load, wouldn't it be acceptable to install that specific structure in Broomfield and not have to go to region 2? right? Los Animas, all region 1, because it's 40 pounds or less. Telluride, it just varies because Telluride, I was doing some test points. It's 120 to I think the lowest was like 126 pounds per square foot, all the way up to 350 something pounds per square foot, right? Those are just random spots that I picked. Doesn't mean that there's something less than 100. It's hard to say. You just have to pick the right spot, and I don't know what that spot is. So it just varies. But most likely, Telluride is going to be region 5, just because it exceeds 100 pounds per square foot. Trinidad, region 1, because it's 30 pounds for Trinidad. It's just one value. Glenwood Springs, same thing. It's one value, 40 pounds per square foot, region 1. Uray counties, because it's elevation based and the range is 24.5 all up to 202.2, is going to be regions 1 through 5. The only problem is how do you break those elevations up and say, hey, a 40 pound falls in between 4,000 feet and 5,000 feet. I just don't know where that breakdown is, if it's 4,200 feet or 4,300 feet where 40 pounds start, right? And say, hey, anything less than 4,300 is region 1. It's really hard to do all those calculations. That's why I said the analogy that Sam was mentioning earlier with the marbles is you just got to pretend that each marble is a data point within that jurisdiction. And if you filter all those out by the buckets, you just say, hey, this bucket represents snow loads and wind loads that are within this range, and they're all that color. So you can only put that data point within a certain bucket, right? So if I know that anything between 0 to 40 pound ground snow load is going to be a certain color, I can only put it in that same exact color bucket. That's that region 1 position that's within that jurisdiction. And it just goes for each other data point. When you filter them all out, they all go into their own bucket, but each bucket plays its role. And it's just hard to designate Colorado on a geographical map and saying these are your regions, because the data points just change. I can do a data point where I'm standing at right now and then go 100 feet to the west of me, and that data point is going to give you different information. So hopefully this table kind of helps that out. If you guys have time, take a look at it and to see how the table works and how the stuff is put together.
Okay. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Donnie. So that's what we've got for wind and snow. This is the other design criteria, which I went through real quick, but I want to pause here and see if there's any specific questions here. And then Donnie, Tim, you got some questions on this?
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick question. I know you mentioned when you had this up before under the wildfire, where it says minimum class 1, which was discussed, quite a bit in the last couple of meetings. And I think that footnote says unless it's not required. But I think you mentioned that if a jurisdiction required a 2, it should be the higher in areas or maybe throughout their whole county. Would that make sense to have that in that footnote too, or is it, maybe I missed it on the footnote?
Well, it's footnote E may be exempt if the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code map or locally amended map approved by the code board classifies location where the structure will be installed with no hazard. But yes, we should add there, it could be 2 if the map requires it.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, so just a clarification, the table itself is just a minimum. So if you're designing like a mass model type, you can't start lower than that 1, right? But if remember, the product itself has to meet the local design criteria. So I guess I thought, we can still clarify it, but it's assumed that if it goes to a jurisdiction that is a 2, it meets theirs. Just like if it goes to a jurisdiction that requires fire suppression and doesn't have it, then it can't go there, right? These are just the minimum requirements.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Any other questions on this piece of it? A lot to digest, I know, for everybody. So I'm certainly not trying to rush through or push anything on you, but please take a look at that if you want to chew on it and shoot us emails or questions. Footnotes, Donnie, anything in the footnotes that you wanted to call out?
No, I think I'll run the footnote B with Justin a little bit more and just make sure that we get that clarified a little bit better of the explanation of what the ground snow loads are. And then I think everything else is set for now.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion on this? We're at 12 o'clock. I want to get to a quick discussion on the 21 and 24 IECC energy code. Any other questions on where we are with this? Okay. So the other thing we heard both from manufacturers and from Shimshkota and from Donnie was discussion on 21 versus the 24 IECC. And we've had several meetings on it internally. We brought in Hope Medina, who is the energy code expert for SCEA. I had a really good discussion with her. And so there is an option, I guess. I know we had previously discussed moving to the 24 IECC, and there's certain advantages to that. I think that there's also some advantages to staying on the 21 IECC. And so that's kind of where we are. Wanted to throw out to the TAC if there was strong thoughts on this. One, if we stayed on 21 IECC, you can build to climate zone 7 for all areas except climate zone 4. Going to the 24, we may have to look at different regions, design criteria regions for either 4, 5, 6, or 7, or maybe 4 and 5 together and 6 and 7. There's a lot of changes in that 24 IECC, and I know we've got Robbie. We talked to Robbie Schwartz too in detail on this, and he has gave us some great ideas for clarity. The energy compliance so the advantage of the 21 is that's our current requirements right now, right? Efficiency credits for residential requirements is simplified, just select an option and provide it. Commercial efficiency credits is based on climate zone, but crediting system is simpler by comparison. In the 24 IECC, you may reduce the ceiling installation, but you're going to require walls or floors to be increased. And one of our concerns was if the extra insulating requirements from which the manufacturers are doing currently in the 21 would change the width of the walls or depth of the walls, and especially for tiny homes. Also, you're width restricted in some of these modules, and do you lose any internal space? We think there are workarounds to that, but we sure want to flag that for manufacturers that haven't had a chance yet to look at the 24 IECC. And then it requires additional efficiency crediting based on climate zone for residential and commercial construction, and requires renewable energy credits for commercial buildings. And then it also has in the 24 thermal bridging documentation. Now, we lost Andre and Hope. I don't want to put words in their mouth. There was some concerns from Hope of requiring just climate zone 7 using the 2024 IECC without adequate discussions on how that all is going to work together. And I will now ask Donnie and Cole, I think we lost Andre, if there's any other things that you want to flag in the discussion of 21 versus 24, and then we'll open it up to the floor. Donnie, you want to go first? You beat Cole to the draw.
Actually, we can hear Cole out first.
No worries, Donnie. If you're all right with that, I will take just a moment to say that with the 2024 IECC, there are more, it's a little more technical and takes a little more involvement on the analysis side of the developer or designer, whoever's doing it, to make things work with the additional requirements for the add-ins in the 2024 IECC. They're a lot simpler in the 2021. Not that I'm advocating for either or, they're both good codes. But the 2021 does make it a little easier to keep using res check and those kind of things, whereas the 2024 kind of hamstrings it just a little bit, but does give more technical lead into those additional requirements of the 2024, whereas 21 they're a lot simpler. And a lot easier to understand and apply, even in a modular or even in a stick built situation. So I just wanted to add that little information in there.
Thanks, Cole. Donnie?
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to mention is, the 2021, it seems like the easier option to move forward with, just because there's not so much that you have to do on the technical side, like Cole was saying. But talking with the TAC members that we have on the TAC team is on the energy side of things. There are going to be some significant changes that go from the 21 to the 24, as we have on this table. One being the efficiency package that's required is no longer being one item that's in the 2021. It's going to be a point system, which is in the 2024. And when you look at the point system, it looks pretty difficult. And while we're going through these slides here, I was looking more and more into it. And a lot of the options that are there that you get points for are things that are already offered as part of the for their models, electric appliances, high efficiency appliances. There's even points that you can get if you are better than what the U factor value is in the I forget what table it is that's in the IECC. So if you have more insulation and you have a better U factor by a certain percentage, you get points for that. Like there's one that if you're, I think, up 30% better or something like that, it gives you all the points that you need. I think it's like 13 points just for Climate Zone 7. So there's a lot of things that you already do as a manufacturer that probably already give you points in the 2024 to get your 10. Where it gets a little more complicated is if you're over 5,000 square feet, then you have to have an additional 5. So there's not a lot of manufacturers that build over 5,000 square feet, but there are some, at least on the single family side of things. Of course, multifamily is going to be greater than that 5,000 square feet. So there's that. The other thing too is in the 2021 Climate Zone 7 and 8 are the only ones that require ERV or HRVs. But in the 2024 Climate Zone 6, 7, and 8 are now going to require ERVs and HRVs. So that changes things a little bit. But when you look at the insulation values, just for clarification, the insulation is not necessarily increased. It's just that there's an option in the wall assembly that was added to be a cavity of R30. And so trying to fit, if you try to do the prescriptive methods, I don't know what size of lumber it's going to need to be in your walls, but to fit an R30, I'm guessing it's probably going to be closer to a 2x6. If you can get like a R22, I think, in a 2x4, so the next size up is the 2x6, you might be able to get an R30 in a 2x6. I'm not sure on that, but that'd be the only way to meet that requirement. And if you can't meet that with the bat insulation in your cavity, you're going to have to add continuous insulation on the exterior or on the interior side, which just means that the assembly itself is going to be bigger, right? And with modular construction and also on the tiny home construction, space is valuable. You don't want to take up space just with insulation. You want to use up as much of the space to be usable for the occupant. So there's those changes there, but I'm going back and forth between the 21 and the 24 and seeing like, hey, you know, how would if we did go to the 24, what is I guess the pros of going to the 24? The one thing that I'm trying to get clarification on is when you look at the efficiency packages, it's broken down by climate zone. So if we do a one climate zone method on our table, how do we apply those points using that point system if we only have one climate zone, even though it might be going to climate zone 5 or 6, right? So that's one thing I need to look at and see how we can apply that. I think it would still be fine because it already gives you points for being better than whatever your required climate zone installation is, but it's hard to say. So I'm going to look into that a little bit more further. But realistically, I think just from what we have so far, staying on the 21 is going to be easier because we already know the code. Jumping to the 24, there's still a lot of unknowns. And then, but the jump to the 24 will also allow you to get that reduction in the ceiling. It's just how do we apply that one zone method if we go to the 24? It might have to be broken down into 5, 6, and 7, or 4, 5, 6, and 7. We just need some clarification on that part.
Right.
Okay. So hopefully that helps with that a little bit.
Thanks, Donnie. Sam and then Robbie.
Yeah, we went to the 24 in Telluride last year. Part of the reason is, well, it's already 26, but we were sort of told that the state, what the state wants from a point of view of energy is somewhat satisfied by the 24. And so that's kind of why we went to it, doing it that way rather than waiting and then having to redo again to deal with state energy codes, which along with wildfire is something else the state is starting to mandate. So that, and others can speak to that, but that's why we've had some pushback too. I know sometimes to get the 24 code in, they have to put in solar to get the points they need and stuff for the HERS ratings. So there are some, it does cost more, but that we feel like that we don't have to keep dealing with it in the next several years every year because of what's been going up and up. So I just wanted to throw that out as well.
Well, thanks, Sam. We did talk to the Colorado Energy Office early in this discussion, and just to give some background, our statute says that for energy codes, we were required to go on the 21 energy code. That's why we moved the whole code set up on January 1st of last year, I think. And then we don't have to make any other changes until the 2030 carbon code, carbon plan, even if I know it's being finalized now, but we don't have to adopt anything related to that until 2030. So that kind of ties in with our next big code change would be about that time. Extremely valuable input on what you guys have seen in the first year. And so with that, I'll let Robbie and then Tim go.
Robbie Schwartz with Built Tank Inc., member of the TAC committee. So first of all, with regards to the additional efficiency packages and the difference between the 2021 and the 2024, the objective is that the home achieve the base efficiency budget that the code requires, basically prescriptively, and you're given a variety of options to do that, either prescriptively or performance based. And then the code is asking you to go beyond that by about 10%. In the 2021, it's basically a prescriptive approach. You can choose one of 5 methods to do that. In the 2024, it's a much more reasonable way of looking at it, in the sense that you're given way more options for how to achieve those levels there. So it's designed to be easier to use. They're trying to achieve exactly the same thing, but they're trying to, in the 2024, to achieve it in a more flexible means for the builder there. So I just wanted to point that out. With regards to the R values, if you look at the 2021 prescriptive R value table and the 2024 prescriptive R value table, they are almost exactly the same for climate zones 4 through 7 and 8. The R values in the attics have come down, and there's some changes in floor insulation, but the wall insulation that the group seems to be troubled by is exactly the same in the 2021 and the 2024. Remember that the prescriptive approach doesn't say that you have to use the R value table. You can use what we commonly call ResCheck, or a software approach to trade off R values and U values. Now, large production builders who are building single-family homes like to trade off continuous insulation, as well as any modular home builder will want to trade off continuous insulation. You can do that not using a performance approach. You can do that utilizing the ResCheck software. How it changed in the 2024 from the 2021 is that software now is looking at total component R values rather than U values to do that, meaning that they added what's called an F factor to be able to better model the energy loss through foundations. Therefore, they can't call it a total UA trade-off approach now. In the 2024, they call it a total component performance alternative, because they're taking into account R values, U values, and what's called F factors, which are basically U values for how energy moves through concrete into the foundation, through the foundation and into soil there. So, but it's exactly the same. And ResCheck is going to just stay called ResCheck. It's just going to use this component performance alternative, which gives you the ability to trade off R values and U values and now F factors in foundations throughout your building assembly. So the reality is that I think there's confusion about the code because it offers more flexibility and there's more words there, but the actual utilization of the code is really no difference. And if you look at the determination that came from the Department of Energy that says what you're achieving at the end of the process, the big change came in the 2021 IECC from the 2018, not from the 2021 to the 2024. So I just wanted to point those things out, that I think you're making a lot more hullabaloo about this than is really needed. They're basically the same code.
Robbie,
one is
thank
more
you
flexible.
Robbie, thank you so much for that explanation. That helps me. Tim?
Yeah, I agree a lot with Robbie. I would be all for moving to the 24 IECC with this process the state's doing right now. And there are a lot of jurisdictions that, in the Front Range anyway, and some of the mountains, that have gone to the 24, and also a number that are in that process. One comment I would have on the commercial side is the base code, the 2024, does have a specific requirement for all new commercial buildings to have on-site renewable. And so if the State Energy Code group, the Low Energy and Carbon Code, Energy Code group, which I was on, voted to delete that or amend that section out because of the potential issues with site-specific constraints, costs, especially on the cost side of things for the additional and the commercial, because multifamily would fall into that, anything above a 3-story. But with that being said, we would have the ability, if we went to the 2024 as a TAC, to amend that section out, because you can make this code less restrictive if you're going with the low energy and carbon code. Whenever that comes about, you can't make that one less restrictive. So those are just my comments on that one particular section.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. With that said, I've got about 6 or 7 slides left. We've got about 8 minutes. Robbie, did you have your hand up again? Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, sorry about that.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you. So I'd like to hear from anybody else that has. I've heard from a couple of the building department reps to the TAC, and of course Robbie with our energy efficiency rep, energy conservation rep. And is there anybody else on the TAC that has a strong opinion on 21 versus 24? We wanted to lay it out. We wanted to get TAC input. I'm hearing that it's okay to go to the 24. Wayne?
Yeah, I dropped this.
We heard from you too. Sorry.
Well, just in case you don't remember, yeah, I'd be in favor of 2024, and just it seems like, especially the timeline of all of this, right? With the new year, I think a lot of folks that were waiting have already switched over, and I think 2024, the longer this kind of drags on, is looking to make more and more sense. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. If you need to sleep on it and shoot me an email, shoot us an email in the morning, please do. We'll wrap this up at the next TAC meeting. With that said, we're at the wrap up. Just to give everybody the schedule, March 11th is when we're going to have that comprehensive draft. March 18th will be the final meeting for the TAC to discuss and finalize those proposed rules. And so then we get into rulemaking. We're going to start our interested parties meeting also in February, so that we hear from it, so we have the opportunity to hear from all interested parties, and we'll keep the TAC advised of when those meetings are, if you guys want to listen into those. So the next couple of slides are what we're going to need to wrap up in the next 3 meetings. February 18th. Final more discussion on rulemaking 2 edits, the regional design criteria changing as needed, review edits to the administrative rules, finalize the GC licensing and education requirements, and then finalize the 2021 versus 2024 IECC, and then review the responsibility matrix also. Robbie, thank you. You've got to jump. Appreciate having you here. Appreciate your time. Next meeting's March 4th, after the last February meeting, and that's to review all TAC recommended amendments. And then in our one-on-ones, we had some very specific requests to consider. Terminations on combustion air and gas appliances, no unvented gas appliances, floor drains required in water heater rooms, 27 refrigerant fire rated cooling shafts, HVAC drain lines, and Broomfield amendments. I think we're gonna, Tim, you had a couple there that you want us to consider it. And then also radon mitigation for all IBC R2 structures and snow guards where applicable. And if anybody else has anything else to consider, we're going to try to wrap all that up on the 4th. We'll put together a background package so that you have that before that meeting, so we can rock and roll through them. We're also going to review the audit process at that point in time. So then the March 18th meeting is just to finalize that rulemaking, right? And any final tweaks to the regional, to the design criteria regions, edits to the administrative rules, the responsibility matrices, and then the audit processes. And so this is our next 3 meetings. Again, thank you. Wayne, I saw your hand maybe went up again. I'm not sure if you had something else.
No, sorry about that.
That's okay. And that's all I had. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Donnie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just before we close out, the one thing that I would like to get some feedback on is I would like to make sure that TAC understands how the table's used. And if it's still confusing, then please let me know. If I don't hear any feedback, I'm assuming you guys understand how it's going to be used, right? Even the manufacturers, especially for the manufacturers. Because if you're like, okay, well, I understand how it is, or if I don't understand how it is, I would like to address it now because maybe the table's not clearly set up in a way that you'll be able to do it. So the whole idea of the table, the way it's laid out, should address every type of scenario that might come our way, right? It'll categorize a building within a region, and then following basically that table checklist, you're just checking off that this structure meets these minimum requirements, and you're checking off that structure meets the minimum requirement for that region. So, but without that feedback, I'm assuming that you understand it. And so please reach out to me if you have anything, or Sam, and we can try to see what we can do on the next presentation to clarify some things.
Yeah, absolutely, Donnie. Thank you. Any other closing comments? Well, thank you, everybody. I do appreciate everybody's time. Again, a lot of deep stuff. And if you want to reach out to us afterwards, please do. Otherwise, we'll see everybody in a couple weeks. Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.